Hello, third graders. This is Mommy Jen, and I'm here to help do our first art in action lesson. So we're going to be learning about an artist. His name is Albert Bierstadt, and he is from Germany. His family was from Germany, but he immigrated to the US when he was very young, I think 2 years old. And he painted this particular work of art in 1869. So right here in 1869, he created this piece of artwork. He was born in 1830 and he died in 1902. So over 100 years ago, he died. His style of artwork is called realism, like this. And it's because his picture looks realistic. It looks real. It looks like a photograph. He did a really excellent job with light and detail. And he was known for doing landscapes of the American West. So remember, this was a time in America when the West was still this wild area and people were moving from the East Coast, and he lived on the East Coast, but he was taking these paintings back with him. He would travel to the West Coast and then he would go back to the East Coast and he would paint these beautiful pictures of what he saw. And I have a really great video that we found about him. I'm going to share my screen and play that. Share. It's only 6 minutes long, so it will be pretty quick, but it was an interesting video explaining Albert Bierstadt and what he's famous for and why he painted what he painted. So I'm going to ask you afterwards why he painted these realistic paintings and how he felt about the buffalo. There's actually, you can't see it very well because for some reason the way the computer did it, there's a buffalo sitting in this picture. You can see it just a little bit on the one that I'll show you after I stop sharing the screen. Okay, let me play this.
During Albert Bierstadt's painting career in the late 19th century, he witnessed enormous changes in the American West. There are bison being slaughtered by the thousands. The numbers are in rapid decline. Native Americans are being forced onto reservations. Population numbers were in rapid change as immigrants were coming from all directions to the region we now know as the American West.
Bierstadt bore witness to these changes, but he didn't only see them, he acted upon them in his own way. He joined early conversations about wildlife and habitat conservation, and he also took up his feelings and his thoughts about these issues in his artwork. Most of us know Albert Bierstadt as an American landscape painter, but in fact, he was an immigrant. He was born in Germany, grew up in Massachusetts, and returned to Germany to study in Dusseldorf.
When he came back from 4 years of study, he brought back with him a form of painting that was very theatrical. The landscapes were staged. They were freighted with psychology and emotion, and they were cued to impress the public and patrons with a sense of mythic grandeur. When he came back, he had to find a niche for himself, and that niche he thought might be the American West.
He got his first opportunity to head west with Colonel Frederick Lander, who in 1859 was headed west himself to chart an overland trail to the Pacific Northwest, crossing through present-day Wyoming.
The Oregon Trail was a busy place at that time. There were almost 20,000 people coming one way or another on the Oregon Trail. That's a lot of people. Part of the mission was assessing the native populations and how they were doing. They met the Sioux, they met the Pawnee, the Arapaho, and the Shoshone.
Following his initial trips into the American West, Bierstadt was inspired to begin a series of immense landscape paintings. One of his first paintings was the Rocky Mountains Lander's Peak.
It really illustrates Bierstadt's early and enduring interest in Native American cultures in the West. This painting shows a Shoshone encampment in the foreground just as prominently as it celebrates the landscape in the background.
Lander had shown him how to bond with Indians, and the Rocky Mountains Lander's Peak was his emotional response to them. He had a real affection for Indian people. He felt that they provided emotional security in this landscape that was so vast and incomprehensible. But his painting was criticized, saying that he shouldn't be incorporating Indian people in his landscape. When it becomes unfashionable to portray Indians in your paintings, he moves to find a surrogate for that narrative element in his work, and that becomes the buffalo.
Albert Bierstadt began to create paintings which addressed the dire situation of the American bison in the West, and by extension, the plight of the American Indians.
Bierstadt is witnessing these drastic changes in the West, and he felt compelled to do something.
In reappraising this art, we are reminded of the efforts by these 19th century artists to preserve the environment, but also the people of the West, the Native Americans.
It's about the moment in our history when we were trying to finally come to grips with preserving something instead of just totally exploiting it. And Bierstadt came to the realization that the West was not limitless.
Let me stop sharing. Okay, so I wrote a few notes down here that Bierstadt noticed changes in the American West. He noticed that buffalo were on the decline, that they were going down, their numbers were going down, and that really the Native Americans were also being affected by this change in the West and so many people moving to the West. He showed his feelings about these issues in his artwork. And how did he show emotion? Saying that he was showing emotion. If you look at this picture behind me, or you look at this little one here, I can show you on here. Oh, it's a little bit harder to see, I think. He shows so much this kind of looming storm coming into following the buffalo. There's actually a trail of buffalo here. There's one center here in the center, and then there's several buffalo following behind, and it seems like they're trying to kind of escape the storm from this. Oh, it's actually this side. Oh, there you can see some of the buffalo. That's why it's a mirror image. I forgot that it switches on the camera. So the buffalo are trying to escape this storm over here and maybe find shelter under these trees. And the mood of this painting is really dramatic, and the light shows a lot of that. show perspective. Perspective, now remember, is making things look like they're either close or far away. So in a painting or a piece of artwork, there's the foreground, which is sort of this bottom third of the painting. And then there's the middle part of the painting is the middle ground. And then there's the background in the back, but kind of where the horizon line is. So how did he do that? Well, he has some trees that are up close here, that are close in the foreground. And then he puts some trees back that are smaller in the background by the horizon line. And he has clouds that are very up in the high in the sky. So one thing that you can do when you are doing your artwork is you want to show a horizon line, and I'm using a Sharpie. You're going to be using a pencil to do first your sketch, and then if you need to use a little pencil on your artwork to do it that way, and then you can use oil pastel and paint over it. But having a tree in the background and having a tree up front in the foreground here will make it look like there's a tree in your closer to you and a tree farther away. And then you're also going to be putting some kind of an animal, and your animal will look much better than mine. Now, you don't have to do a buffalo. You can do any kind of a forest animal is what this art project would like. So you could do a deer. That's supposed to be a deer. I don't know, that doesn't really look like a deer. Kind of looks like a sheep. But remember, this is just my sketch, and this is just quick for you. So let me share one other thing here from the Art in Action company. They have a really great video showing. So here you can see some artwork some other kids did. In your piece, you should have at least 2 trees, or at least a tree in the foreground, looks like it's up front, and a tree in the background. And you need to have at least one animal, one forest animal. If you want to add a meandering, a curving river, or birds, or a storm, you can do that as well. But here is the video showing the project. I'm going to skip through the overview and discussion because I think you got a lot of that from the first video I showed you. So I'm going to go to the sketch here.
Sketch trees in the sketchbook using a drawing pencil. Refer to the picture of trees. Sketch a horizon line. Sketch 2 curving lines for tree trunks.
And you may decide to skip the sketchbooks because for this particular project, it's actually going to be just as easy to do a little pencil on your actual paper, as long as you do it very lightly. And then you can oil pastel and watercolor over it. If you do it too hard, you're going to see pencil lines. So just make sure you do it lightly.
Sketch branches that grow off the tree at angles, like fingers from a hand, getting narrower toward the ends. Sketch a canopy of leaves using rounded lines. Sketch curving lines on the tree trunk to show the texture of bark. Sketch a smaller scale tree near the horizon line. Draw 2 trees. Draw a horizon line in the middle of the paper. Draw a large-scale tree starting near the bottom of the paper and extending nearly to the top. Draw branches using diagonal lines. Draw a smaller scale tree near the horizon line. Leaves will be added with watercolor later. Make the objects in the background smaller, less detailed, and lighter in value to create the illusion of distance. Color the trees. Using brown oil pastel, draw the wide curving lines of a tree trunk.
And if you do some lines, if you do real use this kind of this side and shade in with the oil pastel. It gives a nice rich texture, but then you can also do some dark lines in there. And if you do that, it'll show some texture to the bark of a tree trunk.
Color with analogous colors such as tan, black, or gray to add visual texture to the tree trunks.
Oh, they're using different colored browns to add texture to the tree.
Use darker values for the closer trees. Press hard so colors will resist the watercolor wash. Draw a small animal in or near a tree. Draw a small forest animal using the How to Draw Forest Animals guide. Draw the main lines first, add the details later. Color the animal using oil pastels. Color heavily until the color is glossy. Add such details as fur, tails, ears, snouts, and eyes. Prepare the watercolors by adding 5 or 6 drops of water to the blue and green paint pans. Mix the blue watercolor in the lid. Pour a little water into one section of the lid. Load the brush from the paint pan and mix it into water in the lid. Add more paint until the color is dark blue. Mix enough color to paint the top half of the paper. Repeat the process to make a dark green watercolor.
So notice about how much watercolor is in there. It's not a ton, and you can always make more. So don't make this huge thing and have your whole entire lid green and you have no room for other colors.
Paint the sky. Paint the sky with long, even horizontal bands of color across the top of the paper. Paint over the trees. The oil pastels will resist the wash.
It'll look more realistic if you use, my camera fell asleep there. Oops. Okay, that's okay. We don't need this part anyway. It'll look more, the sky and the ground will look more realistic if you go in long horizontal strips. You don't just do a bunch of little, because you'll see where you start and stop and it won't look as real. And remember, we're trying to make a realistic looking painting as Albert Bierstadt did.
Paint the ground. Paint the green wash to represent the ground. Paint with long, even horizontal bands of color across.
Notice that they turned the paper upside down. They did that probably so that they didn't get drops of paint in the blue sky and didn't rub their hand into the blue sky. They could work a little more precisely having it upside down.
Bottom half of the paper. Paint over the trees and animals. The oil pastel will resist them. Paint the leaves on the trees. Mix shades of green in the paint box lid. Add yellow or brown to the green to make analogous colors. Be sure the sky is slightly dry before dabbing leaves on the trees. Dip the corner or edge of the sponge into mixed paint and
so notice they're using a sponge now to make that realistic leaf
Write a
look to the
poem
painting.
about a
They're
tree
not using
using
paintbrushes
colorful
anymore.
words to create the mood.
Okay, so we'll stop sharing there. So yeah, so have fun with this project. I can't wait to see the finished projects that you guys do. Take your time, don't rush through it, and think about adding lots of details and color, light and dark, and showing that really dramatic, thematic drama into your picture and putting in a lot of emotion into your picture as Albert Bierstadt did. And think about an animal, a forest animal that maybe you would want to protect. Maybe it's a deer, maybe it's a fox, maybe it's a rabbit, maybe it's a squirrel, some kind of an animal that lives in the forest that you want to highlight and do at least one of them. And I want at least 2 trees, one in the front of your picture, one that's small, you know, going to be up in the front. That, I guess it could be small still, but, or bigger in the front, that it's in the front of your picture. And then one showing perspective with a tree back by the horizon line, which is where the sky meets the ground. You're going to want a tree, at least 1 tree. So at least 2 trees and at least 1 forest animal. All right, good luck, have fun. Can't wait to see them. Bye.